Once again, we are talking about the offseason way too early for my Atlanta Falcons. My name is Tyler, here with my brother Ryan, and we're going to break down what you can expect the Falcons to do in the 2025 offseason. But before we get into that, if you like the work that Ryan and I put out and you want to help see the Tracy Take channel grow, the easiest way is hitting that subscribe button, tackling that bell to get notified when new videos come out. And while you're at it, leave a like and a comment. Let us know what you want the Falcons to do this offseason. And Ryan, once again, we had the division in our grasp and then we let it go. It's very familiar, I think, to a lot of memes that I'm still seeing overall when it comes to past important games that we played in the postseason. And it's frustrating to say the least. A lot of frustration, a lot of good. I think is like still come out of it. Like I'm really excited for the Michael Penix Drake London connection that we're going to see. Bijan Robinson took an amazing step forward overall. It's great to know like A.J. Terrell and Jesse Bates talents are being wasted because they're phenomenal. And so I think Caden Ellis had a good second half of the year. It was neat to see him rise. Defensive as a whole play great. After the bye, and I guess until the final game and a half. I would say like second half of Washington to I guess the entirety of the Carolina game. But we're taking the steps. I don't know. I guess we're taking steps in the right direction, but I feel like I've been saying that now for since Arthur Smith got hired.
Well, you guys are taking steps in the right direction in the sense of this is a new regime. Like you have a promising, highly drafted quarterback. This is not a Desmond Ritter situation that I know
Yeah,
you get concerned about. And I think just the product on the field has looked a lot better in the sense of that defense in the second half of the year. You could really see it start to improve. You guys in the first half of the season, you guys would play awful defense in the first half, and then you would kind of figure things out in the second and tighten things up. But the second half of the year, you guys were getting after the passer. You were still stopping the run.
I wouldn't
Uh,
say second half of the year. I would just say after our
After the
bye.
bye,
Yeah,
yeah,
which we had
okay,
we
after the
had a
bye.
week 12. Yeah.
It
That being
it
said, though, once again, in the game we had to do it. Like we didn't control our destiny. Our defense put up a fat egg. No sacks like whatsoever, no pressure.
yeah,
Made Bryce Young look like an MVP candidate. And so. But I see your point though. And that's what was frustrating at the beginning of the year is like defense looked like a high school team in the first half, and the second half, then like they would stop teams, and then that went away. Then they just looked like a high school team for the entirety of the game in the middle part of the season. But so yeah, I want to address the one thing that you talked about, where like one of my fears that we've talked about offline is this is going to be like a Desmond Ritter 2.0, where we see Michael Penix play for a couple of games, like a lot of high excitement in the offseason. I I think that's a legitimate fear based like it just happened a couple of years ago. That being said, it's not as big of a concern because there is a clear talent difference between Michael
oh,
Penix
yeah.
and Desmond Ritter. And that's like one of the major positives that I've already talked about is it does seem like, and a major knock on wood, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it does seem like we've got our quarterback, and so we could start to kind of build around it. And then that's where it kind of gets into the negative a little bit is the uh, why we spend $100 million on Kirk Cousins, if we were going to go this route anyways, and then still end up not making the playoffs as well. So it's and we're going to get into like more of that here in a second, but we're just going to be kind of hamstrung. I feel like on the talent that we can add overall this offseason, and very few draft picks to go along with that because we did tamper to get Kirk Cousins as well. But it was luckily only a fifth round pick. But in general, though, offensively, one of the top offenses in the league, even when Kirk Cousins was having his slow little spell in the middle there, I still feel like we had one of the more dynamic offenses. Our rushing offense improved throughout the season. Like we finished 10th overall in rushing yards, averaging 130 at the end of the year. But we started off pretty slow early on. Bijan started off slow, but then he kind of turned into the bell cow. Tyler Algier came in at key moments and also maybe in some goal line or like some more physical moments. But Bijan really took it up in the second half of the year. Kudos to that offensive line. They've improved a lot as well. Still, I think need to work on the pass offense, which we'll get to that here in a second. But that is one of the positives, though, is it does seem like Michael Penix fits really well into the Zach Robinson offense, and I think
Yeah.
it's going to be exciting. I'm already really excited to just go see that Drake London Michael Penix connection. I feel like they're just going to master the 15-yard out route or the 15-yard hitch route because Penix just has a cannon of an arm.
I forgot just how hard Michael Penix could throw a football. Like I remember watching it all last year. We've been watching him since he was at IU, and I forgot like just how much of a laser he could throw, especially on like those out routes or like the throws that you like really need to zip in there to beat the DB. Like I feel like it's just in there in an instant.
Well,
And
what's amazing is when he throws it that hard, like he is really accurate. Where he's inaccurate is on those touch throws, and he's gotten better at that from when like we've watched him at IU and like at Washington, he was good at it, but you could tell he still need to work on it. I think he's only going to keep getting better at that because the arm talent is unreal. But you're right though, like he's just got. I kind of forgot a little bit too from watching him, but let's kind of move on though now to these free agents here. And one of the things that's really interesting for this team is just there are some key free agents here, but it's not detrimental. It makes sense too why we were so heavy on the defensive line in last year's draft class when you look at some of these guys here. And so like, but to start off though, Justin Simmons, a free agent, he was a 1 year. Maybe he'll re-sign like if the money's right, but we're gonna have to find like finagle some cap space. Mike Hughes, at cornerback as well. I'll go over to D. Alford. So secondary is going to be an option. Is going to be a need here, just in general. Ryan Niesel, I probably mispronouncing that name. Drew Dahlman, they're both centers as well. So the center position, I think that's an area probably the weakest part of the offensive line that we need to improve on, but maybe we'll re-sign one of them. That's something we can talk about later. But particularly though in that front seven, particularly on the defensive line, I'll start listing them off though. But Matt Judon, James Smith-Williams, Lonzo Carter, Taquan Graham, Eddie Goldman, Contavious Street, all those guys are going to be free agents here. And one of the things that's very interesting is we're currently over the cap right now. According to Over the Cap, we're sitting at about $8 million over. And even we still have David Onyemata on contract. But even if we cut David Onyemata, I think we'd save $10 million. So we get up over $2 million over the cap or under the cap to finagle with. But that is essentially most of our defensive line, like starting defensive line from this year. Rook Aurora, when he did play, he had some good film. So maybe it's going to be him and Grady Jarrett next year. Maybe they cut Grady Jarrett. Brandon Dorless, I think he only played a couple of snaps, but so kind of hard to tell really his overall impact. But it's going to be interesting how this team addresses the defensive line here. Wouldn't be surprised if it's another heavy defensive line draft class, but we'll get into that here in a second. Just because of how deep this defensive line is, they're trying to get younger, and maybe they just kind of blow up the whole thing, and they're just going to be super young and know like, hey, we already couldn't get any sacks anyways this year, so like might as well just just blow it up, So as we were 31st in sacks, but we'll kind of have to wait and see. So defensive line and cornerback, and really just secondary, I think in general to help out with Jesse Bates and A.J. Terrell is going to be huge. I already talked about center. I think another sneaky spot here as well that they need to address is the wide receiver position. I know Darnell Mooney. What did his season end up with here overall? Exactly. Was it? So he is just shy of 1,000 yards, and he missed the last game of the season. So that's a good season overall. But I feel like a lot of his game is very, very hit or miss. So like he had 142 against Minnesota, he had 105 in that crazy Tampa Bay game, he had 88 in Philadelphia, and he had a couple other games. He had a good medium stretch here though in the middle of the season where like it was over 80 for 3 games in a row. But it definitely was boom or bust, and Drake London's going to be that number 1 guy. So as I'm talking through this, maybe he's a good number 2. But I still feel like there's just better talent out there that we could go get in the draft class. I don't know if we'll have the maneuverability in free agency, and we'll get to that here in a second on guys that we can go and bring in that would be affordable. Another guy I talk about the receiver position. You got to get Kadale Hodge, dudes at special teams like savant, and then he is a speedster that is a good fill in as well. I think for when Darnell Mooney was out, so to say, and shoot, he got the game winning touchdown in that Tampa Bay game early on in the year. So it's just something that I'm thinking about as well. And also Rondell Moore, like, was a free agent signing, and they couldn't control it, but he tears an ACL. So like, what could have been? Maybe he could have been the guy as well. I would be surprised if maybe they move on from Ray McLeod as well, or maybe just keep him as a special teams guy. But we'll kind of have to wait and see. But those are like I think now that you have your quarterback, Drake London is clearly number one, and that could actually going to be great. You have Bijan. What are some other good role players that need to help out here? Oh, and then move on from Kyle Pitts. Let's trade Kyle Pitts. That's another way we could save $10 million in cap. Get a 6 rounder, trade him with the Chargers or something like that.
I
But
think you get more than a sixth. You could get like a fourth rounder, I think.
sure, that works. I don't
Yeah,
care.
I mean, in the essence of moving on from somebody, I like you're kind of just taking what you get, but I think you get more because he's still an athletic tight end that'll have a role in someone's offense. But
Absolutely.
let's move on to some of the targets here. So some of the targets that you laid out for this team: DJ Reed, re-signing Drew Dahlman to come back and be the starting center there. Go get Brandon Cooks, get that speedster. Shaq Griffin, add another corner there across from A.J. Terrell. Charles Omenihu, go get another edge rusher. And then just in the draft, address that edge position. Micah Williams, James Pierce Jr., Nick Scorton is another guy that could go around that range.
Yeah.
There's a litany of edge rushers that are going to go in the first round, like just all over the place. There's so many. Jahdae Barron, get another corner there. Derek Harmon, day two, Mike Green, Jalen Royals. Just really good, I think, targets for you guys to add to your roster. And this is one of the things, like, so right now I'm a Patriots fan, and the biggest thing that like we're struggling with is like we have a bunch of role players, we don't have our stars. Like in Drake May, Christian Gonzalez, like those guys look like stars. You guys, like Michael Penix looks like your starting quarterback. Drake London is your number one wide receiver. You have AJ Terrell, your starting corner. So like you guys have your key cornerstones of your franchise. You're trying to fill in the role players. And I think that this is a really good draft for teams like the Falcons, who were just looking to draft guys that are going to make the differences on the margins. Sadly, you guys do not have a ton of picks here, but one
Yeah.
option I think that you guys could go with is trade back from 15, put yourself in the mid to late 20s. You could get multiple picks in that route. And to me, the quality of player from 15 to 20 doesn't drop a whole lot. Like you might miss out on one or two like really good prospects that are like have probably a true first round grade, whereas in the mid to late 20s you're drafting like your upper tier second round players.
Yeah. No. And I think that's almost set in stone that we're going to be trading back. Like if you're looking for teams who
Yeah.
want to trade up and go get their edge rusher, and I think another thing too, then to add on to that as well is this draft class really reminds me of the 2022 draft class when it comes to the receivers, as how the receivers were viewed and the trades up, and it's very similar, I think. And the equivalent is the edge rushers. This is just that edge rusher class, like where you're going to have Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, Michael Williams, Jalen Walker, James Pierce Jr. I mean, Abdul Carter, I don't think he's going to fall past 6. He's not going to fall, maybe not fall past 4 with you guys.
Yeah, I would love
And,
that.
and,
That would
and the
be awesome.
Patriots. So, but there's a lot of these guys though that are going to go in the teens, and I go look at teams that are in the late teens, early 20s, mid 20s, like who need edge rushers, who would want to trade up. And I think that Falcons is going to be a premier spot for them to trade back because they just need more draft picks. And I agree with you. This is a great draft class, to kind of build that Super Bowl winning team. I always feel like last year's draft class was where you get your like superstars, your face of the franchises. This is going
Mhm.
to be the draft class where you build your Super Bowl team because there's going to be so many role players or guys that can immediately come in and contribute. Maybe they're not going to be, world beaters and getting these superstar like contracts, but all these defensive ends can provide a lot of serious sacks, provide a lot of serious minutes for these teams here. And even too, as well, skill position player wise, I talk about how we need to get like better in the receiving room also. A lot of good receivers in day 2 and day 3. I think that can come in and help contribute immediately in the Zach Robinson offense. So, and that's just kind of one, and I'll leave this with this one final point here. This is what's kind of frustrating. As I said, it's like, and I fully admit, I think just like a lot of people, we're all super excited to go get Kirk Cousins. And so, to be fair to Terry Fontenot, it's like in the moment, it's like, oh, all right, like we did it. We spent the money. Nobody would have expected it would be this bad and he'd be this immobile. But then that being said, though, too, if the plan was to then get a quarterback with the 8th overall pick, or that was a possibility before you signed him. Now we really are kind of hamstrung on how we can then keep improving around Michael Penix. I mean, it's hindsight to be fully fair, but I rather would have taken Michael Penix Jr. knowing that potentially we don't make the playoffs this year, but like we're building, so let's see what this guy
Yeah.
has working in his offensive system, and then going from there. Um, because then if the defense sucks, and that's why we don't make the playoffs, then okay, fire Jimmy Lake, but offensive side of the ball set, and then like let's figure something out here.
Yeah.
But that's where maybe I'm just complaining now. Maybe I'm saying obvious stuff, but if this is another draft class, or if he makes a couple other poor moves, you do need to start thinking about like we moved on from Arthur Smith. Maybe we got to get another guy in here that is just better. Like smarter, make smarter decisions that are not going to be
You're talking about Terry
detrimental.
Fontenot?
Yeah, Terry Fontenot.
Yeah.
Not yeah, Raheem Morris.
Yeah.
It's way too long. It's way too
Yeah.
early to even say anything. Maybe there's a couple of questionable things, but like I thought he did a fine job as a head coach. I
Yeah.
think Zach
No, I
Robinson
did
did
too.
great. Jimmy Lake, it's good luck in your next job. I guess
I
you already got fired. So
my big thing for the Falcons, and this video is running a little over, but they need to find a way to lighten the load of the Kirk Cousins contract. Like whether that's trading him, even if you take a seventh, a sixth, or a seventh, one that adds to your draft capital in this 2025 draft. But two, like you get that some, if not all, of that cap off your books. I look at like how much cap space does Cleveland have? Like Cleveland has been rumored to be wanting to make moves for Kirk Cousins, um, like to potentially bring him in.
so
Uh,
so everything they're going to have to do to clear out any space is going to have to be with the post June 1st designation. So that means some of that capital is going to carry over into 2026, which
yeah,
at this
but if
point
you
kind of fine.
trade him, then his contract moves with him, and then you can
Uh,
negotiate from there how much of his cap space
yeah.
moves here or there.
So if you trade him with a post June 1st designation, they would save 27.5 million
Yeah,
to the cap. Now that being said, though, I don't know how that would work and what the Browns would take because the Browns are already well into the negative.
that's fair. That's fair.
I think another team that would probably actually work best to trade with actually would probably be Las Vegas. They're in kind of a gap year. They're in a very weird spot in general, picking
Mhm.
six overall. Very likely Cam Ward and Shador Sanders are not going to be on the board. Maybe they trade up, but even to a guy who you trade back into the first round is what I mean. Take a Jalen Milrow, maybe take a Quinn Ewers, Jackson Dart, and try and develop this guy. But that's going to be someone that you kind of develop over the next several years. You do have Aiden O'Connell there. And if we're being honest, Aiden O'Connell has actually played decently well if you go look at his stats. Like, yeah, I think he's every game he started and finished, he's thrown for over
Yeah,
200 yards and he's thrown for a lot of touchdowns. But I think Las Vegas would be the one that would make sense if they'd want to bring him in. They have the cap
the
space
Giants
to
could
do
be
it.
another team.
The Giants can maybe be another team, but it's I mean they are kind of in a win now mode if you look at Brian Dable and Joe Schoen's jobs. But at the same time, though, too, you already have an owner and a fan base that are not particularly happy with you. Let's go bring in arguably the quarterback that caused like one of the worst free agent contract signings, and also too on top of that he is completely immobile as well.
Yeah,
And so
actually, he'd get killed behind that O line. But then
oh
they could take
actually
resources to
that's another thing too. It would
yeah.
be honestly better for Jalen Milrow to be behind the Giants offensive line than Kirk Cousins because at least Milrow could run away. Kirk
Yeah,
Cousins would
that's
get
fair.
destroyed. So
But that for me,
it's
and then the other player that I was going to mention was Kyle Pitts. We kind of already talked about that, but that's a contract I think you guys just need to get out from under.
well,
Uh,
and that's straight up as well. If you trade him, it's just shy of $11 million off your cap.
yeah,
So
yeah,
since it's the fifth year, so that would go to whoever they'd want to go to. I've seen Chargers as a potential one that would want to trade for it, just knowing that like Will Disley right now is their number one tight end. So I think he would come in and be the starter there already. So
yeah.
it's going to be interesting what the Falcons end up doing this offseason. Only have 4 picks, and that's according to Tankathon. I've seen some stuff where they say they have 5 picks. Uh, so like so
Some
so,
some
but
may be taking into account compensatory picks
potentially,
already.
and even to the one that I did see, it was like another 7th round pick. So not like it was anything too meaningful. But we'll
Yeah,
kind of have to wait and see. For the Falcons fans, though, it's next year is our year. You know, so
yeah,
we're gonna do it
yeah.
eventually.
Maybe we'll see. But let's go ahead. Let's wrap it up here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. That is the best way to help out the channel. While you're down there, leave a comment on what you want to see the Falcons do in 2025. Other than that, we will see you guys next time.